Hello YouTube, so I hope you guys have all had a great day. I'm going to start this little video series with part 1 here on how to spray a custom design on a motorbike. So as you can see, we've already got these in primer on stands in the spray booth ready to put the first stage down. Now the first stage of this is going to be to put in the base colour down, which is going to be the base colour for the majority of the colour on this motorcycle. For this we are going to be using the new Sagola 4600 Trophy Truck Limited Edition. This is the 1.2 XL with the Titania air cap on. Now what we're going to be using for the base colour, or I call it the base colour, but it's basically going to be the colour that's going to be the majority of the bike. So the main colour on the bike is going to be a nice bright white. Now for this I've used a 2K, so a straight gloss 2-pack Ford Frozen White. It's a nice clean crisp white, and doing this in 2K is going to give us a really nice base to work from. Now we've already prepped these panels, got all the stickers off them, give them a prime and got them all sanded down, and then in this video we're going to go through getting this 2K gloss down. In the next video we're going to go through the wet flatting of these parts and then lining out the design, and then we'll go for painting the design in part 3 and clear coating it, and hopefully at that stage then show this final bike rebuilt. Now this is actually my own bike. I took this off the road in December of 2018, so it's been sat in the workshop for quite some time now, and I took it off the road because at the time I was ill and I wasn't in a good sort of position to be riding it. So now I've got a little bit of spare time, I've decided, you know, these panels have been sat around for a bit, so we're going to get these primed up and we're going to make a nice little video series for you guys, hopefully that you can pick up a few tips and tricks on. So this 2K direct gloss, I have mixed this 2:1 paint to harden ratio, and then I've got 20% fast thinner in this. Now I've got all these raised up on stands because anyone who's ever tried to paint a motorbike before will know that the hardest part of painting a motorcycle is getting around all the gaps and all the edges, especially on something like this. This is a CBR600rr, it's a super bike, and there are I think around 22 body panels just for the body panels and the little exhaust surrounds and bits and pieces like that, and that's without doing the wheels, the frame, the swing arm, the forks and everything else. So I want to make sure all these are raised up off the stands in the booth, so I can get all those edges to make sure that everything is coloured right around the edges, and it also oversprays a little around the backs, so the backs of these panels are nice and clean. Now for this first coat we are literally just putting down a 50% coat. I don't want a wet coat, I'm not going for full coverage, I'm just putting down a 50% coat. Now not everyone will do this, most people might say, right, well I'm just going to put down a full wet coat, but on a job like this with panels that have so many swage lines and so many shapes and so many angles, the last thing that I can afford on this is to be getting runs and then trying to get runs out of such an awkwardly shaped panel. So for me, the best way to approach a job like this is to give it a 50% coat like that, let it tack off, and then that tackiness is going to give that second coat something major then that it will grip to, so we can put the second coat on as a nice wet coat. Now I've left this panel in the footage as well because it just shows that if you just, with a little bit of ingenuity, if you've got any, you know, magnetic stands or anything, or even a magnetic gun hook like that, if you've got awkward panels you can just tape them to the stands, and then it gives you the option of picking them up, spraying on the underside if it's a panel that needs to be, and then putting them back down again. So coat number 1 is out of the way, and now what we are going to go for is we're going to go for 2 fine but wet coats. We don't really want to absolutely overload these panels. So on the fluid and the gun settings, currently I've got this gun running at 2 bar on the air pressure, I've got it running a full fan, and I've only got it 1.5 turns out on the fluid because these bike panels are so fiddly. I can't afford to shoot like a huge amount of material down and it not all be landing exactly where I want it. So I've turned the fluid down a little bit so I can get a much more precise, controlled aim with the fan pattern of where I am putting the paint as I am going around these bike panels. As I've said before, they are extremely fiddly. You can see just how many swage lines, how many edges, how many angles there are on these. Now there are so many places around these panels that we can get build-ups, runs, sags that are just going to be a nightmare. Now even though we are going to wet flat these down, because my process when I've done my own bikes before is I will use a base colour like this because it's cheap. So we'll use a cheap 2K gloss colour like this to put down the main base colour for the bike, and then I'm going to wet flat the whole bike down with a P1000, put the panels back on the actual bike. Then I can sit in the booth with a few rolls of J-tape fine line tape, draw out a design on the bike, measure it all up, make sure everything looks right to the eye and everything's flowing nicely, and then we can strip the bike, pre-mask out all the areas, put the base coat down in the colours that we're going to put down, and then we can go along and then clear coat that up after. But we'll get around to that in parts 2 and 3 in the next coming weeks, and I will put it in a playlist, so if you're one of the guys that see this video in 12 months time, there will be a playlist so you can follow along with this little video series. Another little video series which we're going to be starting is one that we put to a little bit of a question on our YouTube story page. We asked you guys if you'd like a little bit of a beginner video series covering the basics of the basic fundamentals of spray painting, and doing some short 5-minute videos and a little video series aimed purely at beginners. That is a video series that I am going to start this next week. It will be a midweek upload, and for you guys that are watching those beginner series videos, I'd say stay tuned to the end of every video in those, because when we start the beginner series I am going to start a few small giveaways to go along with that little beginner series, so keep your eyes peeled in the future for the midweek uploads for those coming soon. And also, for all you guys that are watching this video, do me a little favour, take 2 seconds now when I finish talking now, just pause the video, hit that like button if you've gained something from one of our videos or you enjoy the content that we're making and also the direction that the channel is going in. Just give this video a quick little pause and hit that like button, because it really does help us on YouTube to gain a little bit more traction. Or if you're new to the channel and this is the first video that you are watching, take that 2 seconds, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell to be notified of when we have a new upload. Right, so as far as this job is going then, we are working through what really is the the first wet coat on this bike. As you know, we put down the first coat as just a 50% wet coat to give this second wetter coat something to grip to. Now, one thing you probably will notice is that in some of my previous videos I've gone around the side of a car in the same amount of time that it's taken me to put these 2 coats down on 3-4 of these panels so far in this video, and that's because I think that on small and fiddly parts like this, it's kind of the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race with this. You need to be nice and slow, nice and steady, nice and methodical about how you go about them, so you're not missing edges, so you're not missing any gaps, so we're not putting too much material down in the wrong place or going over the same area twice, because as I said before, getting runs or sags or anything on the edge of a panel on this is going to be a lot harder to get rid of than if it was like a run in the middle of a wing or on on an arch edge or something like that. There's just too many areas on this that we really don't want to be having to try and remove runs or sags on or anything like that. We just want a nice, clean, even finish with full coverage over this bike, and it doesn't have to be at this stage immaculately smooth either. I mean, obviously the smoother and cleaner it is, obviously the easier it is to wet flat for the next stage, but I just am aiming for a nice, even, full covered coat over the whole bike, making sure that all these edges, all these little nooks and crannies and bolt holes and the edges around them headlights and stuff like that, everything's fully covered, so when this bike's rebuilt, none of the original red or silver or any of the colours that were originally on this bike show anywhere on it, and when this bike's rebuilt it looks like a full, well, the main colour will look fully white. The other 2 colours that we're going to be using on this will be a pearl red and also a pearl blue, and I think the blue is a 3-stage, but I'll get to that in probably video 3. And it is something to be wary of, when you go around panels like this, when they are tricky to paint like this, just take your time. If it means, like I've done here, I've thinned this down a little bit more than you usually would, and I'm just going to go nice and slow and steady, and I'm going to put an extra coat on. So normally if it was a 2K gloss part, I'd just do 2 full covered coats of white rather than a 50% coat and then 2 full wet coats. Something like this just benefits from that extra 20 minutes in the booth. It's going to give me that peace of mind that when this is rebuilt, that this, you know, when I look at any of the panel edges on this, that I know they're all nice and white, and you know, I'm not going to sit on the bike anywhere when I get it out in the summer and see any little edges where, you know, there's been a bit of colour or something that's been missed, because, you know, I am a bit OCD when it comes to my paintwork, and it really would do my nut if I get to the end of painting this in, you know, 3-4 different colours, clearing it, flow coating it, putting decals, everything on it, and lacquering them all in, and then there's a little edge that's out of place. It will absolutely drive me nuts. But you know, that's where, like I say, slow and steady with, you know, tricky parts like this. Just take your time, don't try and rush them. You know, we've got them in the booth, we spent all that time prepping them, we spent all that time you know, getting the stickers off, cleaning all the panels inside and out, and then blocking them all down, making sure they're all nice and flat, getting rid of any stone chips, etc., all the way across these panels. And literally we have been across every one of these panels. We then gave them 3 coats of high build, fully sanded that down to make sure these panels are nice and perfectly flat, and there's no minor little nicks or knocks anywhere in them. And then obviously we get them into the booth. So when you do get them in the booth, don't rush that stage, because obviously you've put all that work in before. There's no point rushing this stage. Take your time, make the nicest possible job you can. Okay guys, so that's it for part 1, and I'll see you again soon for part 2. Bye for now.